In a dark room, a trail of blood stained the floor. A woman named Wi Seol-Ah stood over a man lying on the brink of death, her sword pointed at his chest. The man's name was Yangcheon. With cold determination, Wi Seol-Ah demanded to know where the remaining demonic humans were. But Yangcheon remained silent, refusing to utter a single word. Yangcheon couldn't believe the situation he found himself in. The woman standing before him, Wi Seol-Ah, was not just any warrior. She was the direct bloodline disciple of the Sword Supreme, renowned for her unmatched power. She had the ability to slay hundreds of demonic humans with a single strike and had even defeated the heavenly demon responsible for the Great Orthodox Demon War. And yet, here she was, not finishing him off, but instead asking him where the remaining demonic humans were. In that moment, Wi Seol-Ah seized Yangcheon by the neck, her voice laced with anger as she accused him of knowing the whereabouts of the remaining demonic humans. Yet, Yangcheon remained silent, refusing to answer her question. Frustrated, Wi Seol-Ah told him that if he felt even a shred of guilt, he would help her find the rest of the demonic humans. Yangcheon knew exactly where the remaining demonic humans were, but he couldn't say a word to Wi Seol-Ah. His vocal cords had been destroyed, rendering him mute. Worse yet, a curse had been placed on him. If he uttered even a single word, the curse would activate, causing his heart to explode instantly. Tears suddenly welled up in Wi Seol-Ah's eyes as she looked at Yangcheon. "This is your last chance," she said, her voice trembling. She told him that everyone wanted him dead, but she was willing to help him if he revealed the location of the remaining demonic humans. She promised to do everything in her power to save him. Desperation overtook her, and she pleaded with Yangcheon, sobbing uncontrollably as she begged him to give her the answer she so desperately wanted. Yangcheon wondered why Wi Seol-Ah was so desperate to know the location of the remaining demonic humans, to the point of tears. Was it her deep-seated hatred for them that drove her to beg so earnestly? He then realized that it was likely because of her fiancé, Yangcheon, who had been kidnapped by the demonic humans. This, he concluded, was probably the reason she was trying so hard. At that moment, Yangcheon allowed himself a faint smile, thinking it absurd that a woman as powerful as Wi Seol-Ah could be so anxious over a single man, her fiancé. Seeing his smile, Wi Seol-Ah's frustration boiled over, and she angrily threw him to the floor. Her voice seething with anger, she told Yangcheon that if she had known how vile he truly was, she would have killed him the moment they first met. Wi Seol-Ah told Yangcheon that she regretted not killing him the first time they met. Yangcheon paused, confused by her words. He wondered what moment she was referring to, suspecting that her memory of their first meeting was different from his own. As he reflected, memories of their past flooded back, the time when they were both just children, meeting for the first time. He couldn't help but wonder where things had gone so wrong, and how it had come to this, him on the brink of death, and Wi Seol-Ah prepared to end his life. At that moment, Yangcheon reflected on his past and realized that he had betrayed countless people and sided with the demonic humans. He concluded that everything happening to him now might be karma catching up with him for all the wrongs he had committed. As Wi Seol-Ah wiped her tears and prepared to leave, frustrated by Yangcheon's silence, she heard a noise behind her. Wi Seol-Ah turned around and saw Yangcheon trying to write something on the floor with his blood. She asked him what he was doing, but just then, the curse activated. Determined to reveal everything despite knowing the risk, Yangcheon continued to write, even though he knew it could cost him his life and cause his heart to explode. As the curse activated, a gush of blood erupted from Yangcheon's mouth, signaling that his heart was on the brink of exploding. The curse, known as the Heavenly Demon's demonic art, was designed by the demon cult to prevent any betrayal. If Yangcheon broke the conditions, the curse would trigger, causing his heart to burst and killing him instantly. Even though Yangcheon knew that revealing the secret would mean his death, he no longer cared and continued to write on the floor with his blood, determined to expose the truth to Wi Seol-Ah. As he did, he began to lose consciousness more and more, drawing closer to death. Seeing this, Wi Seol-Ah grew anxious and approached him, asking if he was okay as he suddenly started bleeding profusely. However, Yangcheon could barely hear her through the blur of his dying state. Wi Seol-Ah urged Yangcheon to stop writing, seeing the pain it was causing him. Meanwhile, Yangcheon wondered how things might have turned out if he could have revealed the entire truth, that he had been framed and was not acting of his own free will. He questioned whether, if she had known the truth, Wi Seol-Ah would have seen him differently and believed his side of the story. Yangcheon then continued writing, telling himself it was too late to dwell on what might have been, as he could no longer change the past. He completed his final message with his blood on the floor, and by then, the curse had fully activated, causing his heart to explode. As he lay there, lifeless, he wondered why he had to live such a tragic life. At that moment, Yangcheon was overwhelmed by flashbacks of his past, recalling the immense suffering he had endured and how his loved ones had also shared in his pain. Meanwhile, Wi Seol-Ah, holding Yangcheon in her arms, wept uncontrollably upon seeing his condition, realizing that he was no longer alive. Yangcheon, of the Shaanxi Gu clan, was born into a prestigious family within the Orthodox faction and lived as a respected martial artist. However, after betraying his roots and turning to the demonic side, he found himself on the losing side of the Great Orthodox Demon War. Captured as a prisoner of war, Yangcheon endured severe torture before meeting his end. As Yangcheon took his last breath and closed his eyes, he heard a voice asking him if he wanted any potatoes. When he opened his eyes again, he was shocked to see a young Wi Seol-Ah standing in front of him. Bewildered, he wondered what was happening, as he distinctly remembered dying and yet found himself standing there, facing her as a child. Yangcheon was bewildered, unable to understand what was happening. He was certain he had violated the heavenly demon's prohibition, leading to his heart exploding and his life ending in Wi Seol-Ah's arms. Yet, here he was, alive, with his heart beating normally as if nothing had ever happened. Yangcheon then examined his surroundings and his own body, realizing that everything had changed. He had reverted to the body of his childhood. At that moment, he wondered if he might be dreaming, though he was puzzled as to why he would be dreaming about the time he first met Wi Seol-Ah. Yangcheon recalled the first time he met Wi Seol-Ah. She had approached him, offering a potato for him to eat, but he had refused her gesture, throwing the potato to the ground. He remembered his anger at her offering such a modest food, which he deemed beneath his standards. He had also scolded her, telling her to know her place and never to offer him something so insignificant again. Reflecting on that moment now, Yangcheon regretted his actions and thought that he should never have treated Wi Seol-Ah so harshly. Yangcheon resolved not to repeat his past mistake and decided to treat Wi Seol-Ah kindly, even if this was merely a dream. At that moment, Wi Seol-Ah, with a sad expression, asked him if he didn't like the potato she had given him. Before she could continue, Yangcheon interrupted her, took the potato from her hand, and smiled as he thanked her for the food. He took a bite, only to immediately regret it as the potato was still very hot, burning his tongue and causing him to scream out in pain. Wi Seol-Ah, seeing Yangcheon struggling with the hot potato, couldn't help but smile and laugh as she noticed his face turn red from the burn. Just then, one of Yangcheon's bodyguards, Muyan, arrived. Addressing him as young master, Muyan expressed his concern over Yangcheon's sudden disappearance. He added that he had been worried something might have happened to him. As Muyan saw Yangcheon's burnt tongue from the hot potato, his concern deepened. Muyan, seeing Yangcheon's condition, became enraged and directed his anger at Wi Seol-Ah, blaming her for harming his master. As he reached for his sword to punish her, Yangcheon intervened, assuring Muyan that he was fine. Yangcheon then asked Muyan to hand over the honey cookie he was holding. Muyan hesitated, explaining that it was the last cookie he had, but Yangcheon took it and handed it to Wi Seol-Ah. Muyan was stunned, watching in shock as Yangcheon gave away his last honey cookie to someone else. Wi Seol-Ah, seeing Yangcheon's gesture, asked if he was really giving her his last cookie. Yangcheon confirmed that he was, smiling shyly as he explained that, since she had given him a delicious potato, it was only right for him to offer something in return. Hearing this, Wi Seol-Ah's face lit up with happiness and excitement. She started to drool, overwhelmed by the sweet aroma of the cookie, as it was the first time she had encountered something so delightful. As Wi Seol-Ah continued to drool over the cookie, her grandfather came running, calling out her name with concern. Seeing him, Wi Seol-Ah rushed to him and embraced him. Her grandfather, relieved to find that she was safe and unharmed, felt a wave of relief wash over him. Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather, visibly worried, scolded her for letting go of his hand and disappearing, expressing his deep concern. Wi Seol-Ah interrupted him, reassuring him not to worry and mentioning that she had even managed to get the potato they were going to buy. Despite her reassurance, her grandfather remained anxious and asked again if she was truly all right. Yangcheon, observing Wi Seol-Ah, was reminded of the past and recalled who her grandfather had been. At that moment, Wi Seol-Ah spoke up, telling her grandfather that she had given one of the potatoes to Yangcheon, pointing him out. Upon seeing Yangcheon, her grandfather quickly grasped Wi Seol-Ah's hand and, bowing his head deeply, offered his sincere apologies to Yangcheon. The grandfather then added that his granddaughter, being inexperienced, had committed a serious offense against Yangcheon, who was a master of a prestigious family. He expressed his sincere apologies, telling Yangcheon that he was truly sorry if Wi Seol-Ah had offended him in any way. Yangcheon assured Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather that he didn't mind at all and that it was fine. He added that, if anything, he should be the one thanking Wi Seol-Ah. Yangcheon explained that he had been hungry and was grateful that Wi Seol-Ah had been there to give him a potato, which he had enjoyed eating. As he spoke, Yangcheon bowed to them as a sign of appreciation. He then offered Wi Seol-Ah a honey cookie, presenting it to her and asking if she would accept it. Although Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather remained doubtful, he was interrupted by Wi Seol-Ah, who excitedly assured them that she was more than happy to receive the honey cookie. Just as Wi Seol-Ah reached for the honey cookie, her grandfather grabbed her by the waist, panicked, and insisted that they could not accept such a precious gift, believing they did not deserve something so valuable. Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather then told Yangcheon that they would not trouble him any further and would leave immediately. As Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather was about to make his exit, Yangcheon called out to him, asking him to wait a moment. Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather turned to face Yangcheon, worried that he might be truly angry with Wi Seol-Ah and preparing to apologize for her actions. However, just then, Yangcheon took Wi Seol-Ah's hand and handed her the cookie as a token of thanks for the potatoes she had given him earlier. Her grandfather was stunned by Yangcheon's kindness and relieved that they had not been punished. They expressed their gratitude once more before departing. As soon as they had left, Yangcheon breathed a sigh of relief. Muyeon, noticing his nervousness, asked if he was uncomfortable while speaking with them. However, Yangcheon remained silent, aware that his unease stemmed from being the only one who knew the true identity of Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather from the past. Wi Seol-Ah's grandfather, Wi Hyogen, was someone Yangcheon remembered from the past. Wi Hyogen had held the position of Murim Alliance leader until recently and was also one of the three Supremes known as the Sword Supreme. The three Supremes were revered as the strongest in Murim, spreading fear and terror among the unorthodox factions. Yangcheon wondered why the Sword Supreme was in a place like this and thought to himself that, even though this was just a dream, he had come close to being killed by the Sword Supreme. At that moment, Wi Seol-Ah turned around and waved goodbye to Yangcheon. Yangcheon smiled warmly as he watched her. At that moment, Muyeon suggested that they head back to their place, and Yangcheon agreed. He thought to himself that he had no more regrets and that it was time for him to wake up from his dream. However, Yangcheon was both annoyed and confused, as despite reaching home, he found himself still trapped in the dream. He wondered why the dream had not ended yet and thought that, if it were truly a dream, he should have already awakened. Yangcheon then speculated that if this wasn't a dream, it might be connected to the heavenly demon's curse. As Yangcheon continued to contemplate the situation, a voice spoke up. When he turned to locate the source of the voice, he saw that it was his second older sister, Yangcheon, also known as Flame Sword Yangcheon. Yangcheon felt troubled by her presence, as she was the one who despised him the most. Yangcheon approached him and remarked, with a hint of disdain, that it was quite surprising to see Yangcheon, who had never attended a clan meeting before, appearing here now. Yangcheon, smirking, added that if Yangcheon intended to come to the clan meeting to cause trouble, he should leave before things worsened. Yangcheon, brushing off her remarks, replied that he was only there out of necessity and that, Since he had never attended any clan meetings before, he would apologize to the clan head later. Gu Yonseo, upon hearing this, became both annoyed and angry. Gu Yonseo, shouting in anger and releasing her power, told Gu Yangcheon that she didn't know what trick he was planning this time, but he should stop immediately as his behavior had made her extremely angry. At that moment, Gu Yangcheon told his elder sister to calm down and informed her that their father, the clan head, had arrived. Their father, arriving on horseback, asked them what the commotion was about. As the patriarch arrived, everyone, including Gu Yangcheon, greeted him respectfully. Although Gu Yangcheon greeted his father, he noticed that his father was looking at him with suspicion, which made him feel uneasy. The patriarch then dismounted from his horse and asked one of his subordinates if there was a sword unit available. The subordinate responded that the first sword unit was resting after a recent mission, while the fourth sword unit was currently on standby. The patriarch instructed his subordinate to have the fourth sword unit complete their preparations and report to him. Gu Yangcheon thought to himself that he couldn't tell if this was a dream or not, but the weight of his father's gaze was as burdensome as ever. While Gu Yangcheon was still lost in his thoughts, the patriarch instructed him to meet privately after the meal. Gu Yangcheon, feeling both worried and scared, immediately asked his bodyguard Muyan if he had any digestive pills. He feared he wouldn't be able to digest his food due to his nerves about the upcoming meeting with his father. After a few moments, Gu Yangcheon, his elder sister Gu Yonseo, and their father were dining together in the same room. Gu Yangcheon thought to himself that the meal was as tense and awkward as ever, and due to his nervousness, he wasn't sure if he was eating the food with his mouth or his nose. The silence at the table was uncomfortable, and Gu Yangcheon wished someone would break the awkward atmosphere, especially given that his father had summoned him for a private discussion later. Their father then called out his second child, Gu Yonseo, and informed her that he had heard about her recent achievement in martial arts. With a beaming smile, Gu Yonseo told the patriarch that she had experienced a minor breakthrough and had recently reached the rank of 3-star. Her father, pleased with her progress, expressed pride and commended her for her advancement at such a young age. He encouraged her to continue her diligent training and remain dedicated to her development. As Gu Yonseo thanked her father for his words, Gu Yangcheon reflected on how impressive it was that his elder sister had achieved 3-star status at such a young age. He thought it was no surprise, given her natural talent and relentless work ethic. Her success seemed inevitable due to her exceptional abilities and dedication. Gu Yangcheon, observing his elder sister Gu Yonseo, noted how her smile brightened when their father praised her. He thought she would look even more radiant if she smiled more often. However, just then, Gu Yonseo glanced at him with a look of disgust, as if he were an insect. At that moment, their father called Gu Yangcheon over and mentioned that he had heard Gu Yangcheon had been out on the streets. Gu Yangcheon explained that he had briefly gone out for some business. Their father then decided to excuse himself from the meal, instructing his children to continue eating and finish their meal. Gu Yangcheon was puzzled by his father's actions. It seemed as though his father had intended to say something but ultimately chose not to. As Gu Yangcheon wondered why his father had previously requested a private meeting, one of the maids approached him. She informed Gu Yangcheon that his father had instructed him to rest well that day and to come to the clan head's room the next day for their private meeting. After finishing his meal, Gu Yangcheon returned to his room, deep in thought about why his father wanted to meet with him privately. He also considered that, since he had not woken up from what he had initially believed to be a dream, this might not be a dream at all. Instead, it could be real life, and he might be experiencing a regression, something he had only heard about before. Gu Yangcheon then wondered whether this situation could be an opportunity for him to defeat the heavenly demon. However, he quickly dismissed the idea, realizing that he was not powerful enough to confront such a formidable foe. He recalled that the heavenly demon had single-handedly defeated all 3 supremes, who were considered to be unparalleled in power. Given this, Gu Yangcheon felt he would stand no chance against such a formidable adversary. As Gu Yangcheon reflected on his past life as a damned demonic human, living under the control of the heavenly demon and forced to obey to survive, he was overwhelmed by a deep sense of regret. However, He also recognized that these regrets had imparted a crucial realization. If he were truly reborn, he would choose a different path from his previous life. Yangcheon reflected on his past life, recalling that Wi Seol-Ah would ultimately defeat the heavenly demon and that the demonic cult would be vanquished. He decided that until those events unfolded, he would live a quiet life. With renewed determination, Yangcheon vowed not to repeat the regrets of his previous existence. At that moment, Yangcheon activated his internal energy to assess its current level, only to be disappointed by the meager amount he possessed. Observing his internal energy made him clearly aware of how remarkable his sister was in comparison. Despite being only 1 year older than him, she had already achieved 3-star status. But Yangcheon refused to be discouraged and was determined not to give up easily. He knew that he wasn't powerless and had options to improve his situation. One of his resources was the Gu Flame Wheel art, a cultivation technique passed down only to blood relatives of the Gu clan. Yangcheon began to diligently practice the art, aiming to strengthen and expand his internal energy. By cultivating his internal energy gradually, Yangcheon knew that once he reached the 4-star level, he would be able to emit flaming eternal energy. At the 7-star level, he could wrap this energy around his body, effectively merging it with himself. Currently, as a 1-star, Yangcheon realized that he needed to focus on advancing to 2-star first. To achieve this, he needed to accumulate internal energy as quickly as possible and refine it until he reached the 2-star level. Yangcheon reflected that, to lead a smoother life compared to his past, he should rely on developing his own strength rather than borrowing the powers of demonic humans. As he concentrated on cultivating his internal energy, he faced a critical issue. Continuing any further for the day could potentially endanger his life. Recognizing this risk, Yangcheon decided to stop his training for the day. Exhausted and lying on the floor, Yangcheon thought about how challenging it was to use his internal energy with his current abilities. He worried that continuing to push himself might lead to energy deviation. Despite this, he smiled to himself, pleased with the progress he had made. Even though he was still in the early stages, he had successfully reached the 2-star level. Yangcheon resolved to advance steadily, neither rushing nor dragging his progress. He vowed to make his new life different from his past one, avoiding any actions that might negatively impact his future. The next morning, Yangcheon awoke to find his entire body aching, despite having trained only briefly. He realized that his lack of prior training had made his body unaccustomed to sudden, intense exertion. Yangcheon understood that he faced a long and challenging journey ahead and resolved to work diligently if he wanted to succeed. Yangcheon grabbed the door handle, planning to train until his meeting with the clan head in the afternoon. However, as soon as he opened the door, he was surprised to find Wi Seol-Ah sitting on the floor right outside his room, smiling up at him. A long time ago, the sky suddenly darkened and began to crack. As people stared in confusion, wondering why the sky seemed to be splitting apart, monsters emerged from the rifts. These creatures began attacking and killing humans. The cracks in the sky served as gateways to the demon realms, allowing demons from another world to invade. To combat the demons, each sect established a specialized group known as the Sword Units. Every sect was required to have at least 1 sword unit. The Gu clan, however, had 5 sword units, with Yangcheon's eldest sister, Hebe, serving as the commander of the 5th sword unit. While Hebe commanded her unit, Yangcheon spent much of his life enduring his sister's strict discipline. It was during one of these harsh encounters that Yangcheon first met Wi Seol-Ah. Although their initial meeting after the potato incident was supposed to occur 6 months later, Wi Seol-Ah was now greeting him with a bright smile just as he had awoken. Yangcheon, seeing Wi Seol-Ah, thought he might not have slept properly and that he was simply dreaming. He decided to retreat back into his room, but before he could, Wi Seol-Ah grabbed him by his clothes. She looked at him with a smile and greeted him warmly, but just as she was about to say something important, her grandfather, Wi Hyogen, intervened. Wi Hyogen slapped his granddaughter's hand away, forcing her to release Yangcheon. He then scolded Wi Seol-Ah, reminding her that she was not to treat the young master, Yangcheon, with disrespect. Yangcheon, meanwhile, was confused by Wi Hyogen's comments. At that moment, Wee Hyogen instructed Wee Seol-Ah to apologize to Ji-Yu Yangcheon for not showing him the proper respect. Feeling depressed after being scolded by her grandfather, Wee Seol-Ah apologized to Ji-Yu Yangcheon for her behavior. Ji-Yu Yangcheon, however, remained confused about the situation, as he had no idea what was happening. As Ji-Yu Yangcheon was still trying to process the situation, Wee Hyogen introduced himself, stating that his name was Wee Moon. He explained that he would be serving Ji-Yu Yangcheon from that moment onward as a gesture of gratitude to the clan head. Acknowledging that Ji-Yu Yangcheon might not be pleased with the servitude of an old man like himself, Wee Hyogen bowed respectfully and assured him that he would do his utmost to serve him well. Ji-Yu Yangcheon was puzzled, as he had always known Wee Seol-Ah's grandfather by the name of Wee Hyogen, yet here the man was introducing himself as Wee Moon. Just then, Wee Seol-Ah greeted Ji-Yu Yangcheon and introduced herself, saying that her name was Wee Seol-Ah and that she would also be assisting her grandfather from that point forward. Ji-Yu Yangcheon was shocked by what he heard, surprised that they would be serving him from now on. He sighed, thinking to himself that if these were orders from the clan head, it was likely his father who had instructed them to serve him. Ji-Yu Yangcheon then reflected that he might already be entangled in significant trouble from the very start of his newly regressed life. Ji-Yu Yangcheon greeted the two and asked them to refer to him simply as Yangcheon instead of calling him young master, as he felt uncomfortable with the title. Wee Hyogen acknowledged Ji-Yu Yangcheon's request, yet continued to address him as young master, leaving Ji-Yu Yangcheon confused about what part of his request they had actually understood since they were still using the title. A few moments later, as Ji-Yu Yangcheon sat on the floor, he remained surprised by the sight before him. The man once known as the Sword Supreme in his past life was now sweeping the floor and serving him. Even more astonishing to Ji-Yu Yangcheon was that this person, once considered one of the most powerful beings in the world, was now doing his laundry. The maids walking alongside Wee Seol-Ah noticed her struggling with the laundry and offered to help, feeling sorry for her. However, Wee Seol-Ah politely refused, insisting that she was fine and could manage on her own. Just as she said this, she tripped over a stone, sending herself and all the clothes she was carrying tumbling to the ground. The others, seeing her fall, were worried but also unsure of how to react, as she had just refused their help moments before and was now lying face down on the ground. As Wee Seol-Ah lay flat on the ground, she felt a wave of disappointment in herself, and tears began to well up. While the maids helped her to her feet, Ji-Yu Yangcheon watched and wondered how she could be so bad at such simple chores. He thought that Wee Seol-Ah should possess some martial arts talent, so he was shocked to see how clumsy she was, so unlike the Wee Seol-Ah he remembered from the past. As Ji-Yu Yangcheon was contemplating Wee Seol-Ah's situation, she suddenly approached him, her eyes still brimming with tears. Seeing this, Ji-Yu Yangcheon asked her why she was here and not continuing with her chores. Wee Seol-Ah then explained that she had been instructed to follow him wherever he went. Ji-Yu Yangcheon then asked her who had given her that instruction. With tears still in her eyes, Wee Seol-Ah revealed that it was her grandfather who had told her to follow him. Ji-Yu Yangcheon wondered why they had assigned her to take care of him and, after some thought, concluded that they might have left the responsibility to Wee Seol-Ah because they found him troublesome and did not want to deal with him themselves. At that moment, Ji-Yu Yangcheon thought to himself that, as the son of a prominent clan, it seemed odd that his personal servant would be assigned so haphazardly. While Wee Seol-Ah quietly adjusted his clothes, Ji-Yu Yangcheon reflected that having her as his personal servant was acceptable. However, he felt overwhelmed by the pressure of adapting to a lifestyle so different from what he had known in his previous lifetime. At that moment, Wee Seol-Ah mentioned that she was tidying up his clothes. However, when Ji-Yu Yangcheon looked at them, he saw that they were in even worse condition than before. He decided to handle it himself, which upset Wee Seol-Ah. Ji-Yu Yangcheon then wondered if his father was aware of the true identities of Wee Seol-Ah and Wee Hyogen. He also questioned whether his father simply didn't care about their identities and had assigned them to him out of convenience, given the number of servants who had quit after taking care of him. Ji-Yu Yangcheon remembered that his father had asked him to come to his room that day and thought he would find out more about the situation during that meeting. As Ji-Yu Yangcheon was about to head out, Wee Seol-Ah asked him to wait, saying she intended to accompany him. Ji-Yu Yangcheon stopped her, inquiring where she planned to go and telling her to stay behind and work a bit longer to get the hang of things. Upset at the thought of not being able to follow him and on the verge of tears, Wi Seol-Ah reconsidered and agreed with Yangcheon's suggestion. Meanwhile, Wi Hyogen observed the scene quietly from a distance. Yangcheon noticed that Wi Seol-Ah was upset but decided it was best for her to stay and learn more about her duties, knowing it would be beneficial for her in the long run. As he prepared to leave, he told her she should focus on mastering her job first. Seeing her distress at not being able to accompany him, Yangcheon promised that he would bring her a treat when he returned and encouraged her to do her best at work. Upon hearing this, Wi Seol-Ah's mood brightened instantly, and she became enthusiastic at the prospect of the treat. The others were amazed at how quickly her mood had shifted from sadness to excitement. At that moment, Yangcheon stood outside his father's room, feeling nervous and worried at the same time. In his previous life, he and his father had never been particularly close, and they had never spoken personally as they were about to do now. Yangcheon wondered if his father had something important to discuss with him, given that he had specifically called for him. Once his father had finished whatever he needed to say, Yangcheon planned to ask about Wi Seol-Ah and Wi Hyogen, and why they were assigned to his quarters. As Yangcheon stood lost in thought near the door, his father suddenly appeared and asked what he was doing. Startled by his father's unexpected presence, Yangcheon exclaimed loudly that his father had frightened him. His father then told him not to waste time and to come inside immediately, which Yangcheon did. Once they were inside and settled, Yangcheon's father asked if he had met his new servants. Yangcheon replied that he had seen them and had greeted them as well. Yangcheon's father then asked what he thought of his new servants. Yangcheon responded that he was grateful for the help, but he was curious about why his father had chosen them specifically. At that moment, Yangcheon's father told him not to question it and that he would explain the situation when the time was right. Upon hearing his father's response, Yangcheon realized that his father had sent Wi Hyogen and Wi Seol-Ah to be his servants despite knowing their backgrounds and identities. He began to wonder if his father had made some kind of arrangement with Wi Hyogen, which might explain why they were assigned to serve him. At that moment, Yangcheon's father told him not to worry about such minor issues. He instructed Yangcheon to prepare for the Unified Dragon Assembly, which was scheduled for the next day. Yangcheon agreed to do so, but he was puzzled about what the Unified Dragon Assembly entailed, as he couldn't recall its significance. While he was contemplating this, Yangcheon suddenly remembered what the Unified Dragon Assembly was about, leaving him shocked. After his meeting with his father ended, Yangcheon emerged from the room looking like a lifeless shell. Standing there, devoid of energy, he asked his bodyguard Muyan to slit his throat immediately, expressing his deep reluctance to attend the Unified Dragon Assembly. Concerned, Muyan asked his master if he hated the idea of going to the assembly so much that he would resort to such extreme measures. Yangcheon confirmed that his dislike was indeed that strong. The Unified Dragon Assembly was a crucial event held twice a year to select new members for the sword units, who were responsible for closing the gates of the demon realm. These units risked their lives for the Gu clan and the residents of Shaanxi, making attendance at the assembly mandatory for the direct bloodline of the Gu clan. Yangcheon, contemplating the Unified Dragon Assembly, once again urged his bodyguard to slit his throat, convinced that death was the only way to avoid attending. Muyan, with concern, reassured him that such drastic measures were unnecessary because if Yangcheon skipped the assembly, his father would personally come to punish him. Frustrated by the realization that he couldn't escape the event, Yangcheon grew more irritated. Muyan then added that Elder Li would also be present at the assembly. This news surprised Yangcheon and made him even more reluctant to attend. Muyan then informed Yangcheon that Elder Li would personally come to punish him if he tried to avoid the meeting. Yangcheon thought to himself that, of all the elders, Elder Li was particularly harsh. He recalled how Elder Li had always insisted that he must act with highest propriety as the only son in the family, making him responsible for upholding the clan's honor and prestige. Yangcheon thought to himself that, although Elder Li was very strict, he was someone to be grateful for. However, Yangcheon also found Elder Li quite troublesome. Despite this, Elder Lee would always find time to seek him out and offer guidance. The constant scolding and punishment from Elder Lee had made Ji-Yu Yangcheon want to avoid him as much as possible. Ji-Yu Yangcheon then reflected on how, despite undergoing such rigorous training under Elder Lee both in his past life and in the present, he still managed to end up feeling like a failure. Ji-Yu Yangcheon then asked Muyan when they would be leaving. Muyan replied that they would depart as soon as everyone was ready. In the distance, the servants were gathered around Wi Seol-Ah, complimenting her on her beauty and joking that she would break every man's heart when she grew up. Hearing the commotion, Ji-Yu Yangcheon called over one of the servants, Honghwa, and asked if they were ready yet. Honghwa apologized and explained that they were still attending to Seol-Ah. Ji-Yu Yangcheon thought to himself that Wi Seol-Ah must have caused some trouble again. At that moment, Wi Seol-Ah stepped forward, and everyone was stunned by her beauty. Upon seeing Wi Seol-Ah, Ji-Yu Yangcheon was so captivated by her beauty that he found himself speechless. Wi Seol-Ah then broke the silence, mentioning that everyone was saying how pretty she was and asked Ji-Yu Yangcheon if he thought the same. Ji-Yu Yangcheon blushed deeply, feeling too embarrassed to respond to her question. Though he thought Wi Seol-Ah was indeed very pretty, he couldn't bring himself to say so out loud and chose to change the subject instead. He asked if everyone was ready to head to the assembly. Wi Seol-Ah tried to ask him the same question again, but Ji-Yu Yangcheon ignored her once more, which made her feel very disheartened as she sensed he was avoiding her question. After a few moments, they were on their way to the Unified Dragon Assembly. Inside the carriage, Wi Seol-Ah had her head sticking out of the window and shouted with excitement, expressing how much she loved the sensation of the fast-moving carriage. A servant then asked Wi Seol-Ah if this was her first time riding in a carriage. Wi Seol-Ah eagerly replied that it was indeed her first experience. She added that she had only thought of horses as creatures meant for eating and had no idea they could be used to pull carriages and run so fast. The servant was astonished by what Wi Seol-Ah had said. At that moment, Ji-Yu Yangcheon leaned out of the carriage window and asked his bodyguard Muyan, who was riding alone on horseback, where the Unified Dragon Assembly was going to be held. Muyan informed him that the assembly would take place at the Heavenly Exchange. Ji-Yu Yangcheon recalled that the Heavenly Exchange was the most famous shopping district in Shaanxi and thought that Elder Lee, who was in charge of organizing the assembly, must have put a lot of effort into arranging it there. Muyan then informed Ji-Yu Yangcheon that it would take about 4 hours to reach their destination, suggesting that Ji-Yu Yangcheon should take a nap since they had a long journey ahead. Ji-Yu Yangcheon agreed, noting that it was a good idea because he hadn't slept at all due to training all night. At that moment, Wi Seol-Ah interrupted Ji-Yu Yangcheon and excitedly told one of the servants that, although horse meat had a slightly funky smell, it still tasted great. Ji-Yu Yangcheon grew irritated with Wi Seol-Ah's constant chatter, so he grabbed a honey cookie and placed it in her mouth to silence her. Wi Seol-Ah, now occupied with eating the cookie, stopped talking, giving Ji-Yu Yangcheon the peace he desired. With the noise finally subdued, Ji-Yu Yangcheon decided to take advantage of the quiet and rest, planning to nap until they reached their destination. After a few moments, Wi Seol-Ah woke Ji-Yu Yangcheon. As he slowly opened his eyes, she asked if he had any more cookies, as she had finished the one he had given her. Ji-Yu Yangcheon told her that was the last cookie he had. Disappointed by the lack of more cookies, Wi Seol-Ah was then told by one of the servants to inform their master, Ji-Yu Yangcheon, that they had arrived at their destination. Ji-Yu Yangcheon immediately got up and opened the curtains to see what was outside. As Ji-Yu Yangcheon stepped out of the carriage, he noticed that the market was more crowded than usual, likely due to a festival being celebrated. While he continued to stretch and observe his surroundings, a man approached him and greeted him, noting that he might be tired from the journey. Ji-Yu Yangcheon turned to see who was speaking and found that it was Chun Ishil, the vice merchant head of the Heavenly Exchange. Chun Ishil expressed his honor at meeting the rising star of the Ji-Yu clan, Ji-Yu Yangcheon. Ji-Yu Yangcheon returned the greeting, stating that it was also an honor for him to meet Chun Ishil. Chun Ishil then informed Ji-Yu Yangcheon that the first day of the festival had gone very smoothly, thanks to the efforts of Elder Lee and Ji-Yu Yangcheon's elder sister. Noting that Ji-Yu Yangcheon might be tired from the journey, Chun Ishil offered to guide him to his room. Ji-Yu Yangcheon, upon hearing about his sister, hoped he would avoid any encounters with her during his stay. However, his concern quickly became reality when, on the way to his room, he found himself face to face with his sister, Ji-yu Yonseo. Ji-yu Yonseo, upon seeing Ji-yu Yangcheon, became visibly upset. When Ji-yu Yangcheon greeted her, she sharply told him not to be so casual, as she was genuinely annoyed by his presence. She then warned him not to entertain any thoughts of causing trouble during the Unified Dragon Assembly, emphasizing that nothing was more disgraceful than bringing shame to the family. Ji-yu Yangcheon responded, assuring his sister that she needn't worry about him. He promised to stay out of trouble and be as quiet as a mouse while he was there. Ji-yu Yonseo, upon hearing Ji-yu Yangcheon's response, angrily told him that she wasn't worried about him at all. Her gaze then fell on Wi Seol-Ah, who, noticing Ji-yu Yonseo's stare, hid behind Ji-yu Yangcheon in fear. Ji-yu Yonseo's irritation flared at this and she remarked that some old habits never die. She also questioned whether Wi Seol-Ah would continue behaving in her usual manner. Ji-yu Yangcheon, confused, asked his sister what she meant, but Ji-yu Yonseo simply commented that she had hoped Wi Seol-Ah would have changed, though it seemed people never do. Ji-yu Yangcheon, confused by his sister's comments, chose to ignore them and suggested that everyone should get moving. He then apologized for the quarrel between him and his sister, but Chun Ishil reassured him, saying it was normal for siblings to argue and that they didn't mind. Chun Ishil added that they should proceed, as everyone might be tired from the long journey. However, Ji-yu Yangcheon mentioned that he needed to make a stop before heading to his room. Upon reaching the venue for the festival and assembly, Ji-yu Yangcheon was astonished by the splendor and scale of the place. Wi Seol-Ah, seeing the vast expanse, remarked to Ji-yu Yangcheon that she had never seen a building so large before. Ji-yu Yangcheon thought to himself that while he knew merchants often showcased their financial power through the lavishness of such events, he was still surprised by the extent of the expenditure for this festival. Today's festival was dedicated to celebrating the sword units and honoring their remarkable efforts in protecting the people. On that day, duels were scheduled to take place to select new members for the sword units. Ji-yu Yangcheon was relieved that, being of the bloodline, he was exempt from participating, which meant he could simply watch and enjoy the competitions without having to fight. He was content, believing nothing would disrupt his peaceful observation. However, as he was thinking this with satisfaction, a towering figure with a formidable aura appeared, standing behind Ji-yu Yangcheon and Wi Seol-Ah. At that moment, the towering man spoke, saying, "So you didn't run away this time." Ji-yu Yangcheon was startled by the unexpected voice behind him. As he turned to face the man, he saw the man extend his hand toward him. Panicking, Ji-yu Yangcheon thought he needed to block the man's hand. But suddenly, the tension eased, and the intimidating figure, now smiling warmly, began to pat and rub Ji-yu Yangcheon's head. To Ji-yu Yangcheon's surprise, the man was Elder Lee. Elder Lee then inquired with a smile why Ji-yu Yangcheon had not tried to escape this time, noting that Ji-yu Yangcheon had always run away whenever he saw Elder Lee in the past. Ji-yu Yangcheon replied, explaining that someone had warned him they would fold him in half if he didn't attend the festival. Elder Lee was taken aback and asked Ji-yu Yangcheon who had made such a harsh threat. Ji-yu Yangcheon responded that it was Elder Lee himself who had said it in the first place, expressing surprise at Elder Lee's reaction. Hearing this, Elder Lee laughed heartily and remarked that he was impressed by how Ji-yu Yangcheon had learned to stand up to him. As he patted Ji-yu Yangcheon's head, he continued to smile, clearly pleased with Ji-yu Yangcheon's newfound confidence. At that moment, Ji-yu Yangcheon wondered why Elder Lee seemed to have an unusual focus on him. He speculated it might be because, as the only son of the clan head, Elder Lee likely had high expectations for him. Meanwhile, Wi Seol-Ah, filled with excitement, loudly referred to Elder Lee as a bear. She then added that bears were delicious to eat, just like horses. Before she could say anything else, Elder Lee's attention shifted to her, and he fixed her with a stern, angry gaze. Terrified, Wi Seol-Ah was on the verge of tears as she tried to speak but found herself too frightened to continue, overwhelmed by Elder Lee's intense look. At that moment, Ji-yu Yangcheon positioned himself between Elder Lee and Wi Seol-Ah, telling Elder Lee that his fierce gaze was intimidating everyone. Wi Seol-Ah, trembling with fear, hid behind Ji-yu Yangcheon and quietly declared that she would no longer eat bears. Upon hearing this, Elder Li's expression softened, and he asked Ji-yu Yangcheon if Wi Seol-Ah was his concubine. Ji-yu Yangcheon pointed out Wi Seol-Ah's attire and explained that she was merely his servant. Elder Li, however, appeared skeptical and found it hard to believe that their relationship was solely that of a master and servant. Elder Li then shifted the topic, reminding Ji-yu Yangcheon that the Unified Dragon Assembly was scheduled for the next day. Despite being just a spectator, Elder Li insisted it was time for Ji-yu Yangcheon to get some rest, as it was already late, and he still needed to attend the assembly. Ji-yu Yangcheon agreed with Elder Li's advice. Elder Li added, with a stern tone, that if Ji-yu Yangcheon attempted to run away, he would not let him escape easily and would ensure he faced consequences. Upon hearing this, Wi Seol-Ah ran off, urging Ji-yu Yangcheon to hurry. Elder Li and Ji-yu Yangcheon then went their separate ways. As Ji-yu Yangcheon walked toward Wi Seol-Ah, she asked if the bear, referring to Elder Li, was going to eat him. Ji-yu Yangcheon replied with a smirk that he would strangle him first before eating him. Meanwhile, as Elder Li made his way back, he thought to himself that there was indeed something special about Ji-yu Yangcheon and resolved to keep a close watch on him. The next day, the day of the Unified Dragon Assembly arrived. Ji-yu Yangcheon mentioned to Muyeon that he had expected the assembly to start early in the morning. However, seeing the line, he concluded that it would actually begin around lunchtime. Muyeon agreed with Ji-yu Yangcheon's assessment. Ji-yu Yangcheon thought to himself that the Unified Dragon Assembly allowed anyone from the numerous Shaanxi clans or anyone who could prove their identity to participate in the selection for the Swords unit. However, he was surprised by the sheer number of participants. Observing the crowd, Ji-yu Yangcheon remarked to Muyeon that joining a Swords unit must be challenging, to which Muyeon agreed. Behind Ji-yu Yangcheon, Wi Seol-Ah looked terrified. She was still fearful of Elder Li, convinced he might come to take her head. Annoyed by her behavior, Ji-yu Yangcheon told her that if she was so scared of Elder Li, she should have stayed at the headquarters. However, Wi Seol-Ah replied that she couldn't do that because her grandfather, the Sword Supreme, had instructed her to always stay by Ji-yu Yangcheon's side. Realizing he couldn't ask Wi Seol-Ah to disobey her grandfather, Ji-yu Yangcheon decided to let the matter go. Ji-yu Yangcheon reassured Wi Seol-Ah, telling her that she didn't need to worry because Muyeon, his bodyguard, could handle Elder Li if necessary. This news excited Wi Seol-Ah, as it meant she wouldn't have to worry about Elder Li coming after her and felt she would be safe. Muyeon, overhearing the conversation, asked Ji-yu Yangcheon what they were discussing. When Ji-yu Yangcheon mentioned Elder Li, Muyeon became concerned and whispered that he wouldn't be able to touch Elder Li at all. He also advised Ji-yu Yangcheon to speak of Elder Li with more respect, as Ji-yu Yangcheon had been too casual in referring to him. Even though Muyeon was whispering, Wi Seol-Ah heard everything and began to feel scared again, realizing that she wasn't truly safe from Elder Li. Noticing her distress, Ji-yu Yangcheon sarcastically told her that it was time for her to give up and surrender her head to Elder Li. This made Wi Seol-Ah panic even more, and she was on the verge of tears, with her eyes welling up. Ji-yu Yangcheon knew that Elder Li wouldn't harm Wi Seol-Ah, but he enjoyed teasing her, so he playfully told her that today would be the day she met her end. After a few moments of teasing, he reassured her that it was just a joke and that nothing bad would happen. Despite this, Wi Seol-Ah was still too frightened to take in his words. She told him that since she was going to die today, her grandfather had said that ghosts who die with a full stomach look prettier. As she spoke, she pointed to a shop selling dumplings, her mouth watering with anticipation. After a few moments, Ji-yu Yangcheon decided to treat Wi Seol-Ah to dumplings. Muyeon, observing this, remarked that Ji-yu Yangcheon was treating his servant Wi Seol-Ah very well, even though she was just a servant. Ji-yu Yangcheon, surprised by this observation, asked Muyeon if he was referring to Wi Seol-Ah, and Muyeon confirmed that he was. Ji-yu Yangcheon was confused about how he was treating her well. He had bought the dumplings partly because he wasn't sure how to interact with her. In his previous life, his encounters with Wi Seol-Ah had been inconsistent, and he had treated her differently each time. Now, he was uncertain about how to behave around her. Muyeon, with a smile, remarked that Wi Seol-Ah didn't fully grasp the concept of a servant, as she always interacted with Yangcheon as if they were family. Despite her friendly demeanor, Yangcheon still chose to buy dumplings for her. Yangcheon was about to respond to Muyeon but found himself at a loss for words, unable to explain why he treated her this way despite her being his servant. Muyeon smiled at Yangcheon's silence, finding amusement in his inability to articulate his feelings. Muyeon then told Yangcheon that he was different from what the rumors suggested. He added that one should not place too much trust in rumors and that he had much more to learn after meeting Yangcheon. Yangcheon, surprised by Muyeon's comments about the rumors, asked how long Muyeon had been his bodyguard. Muyeon responded that he had been serving as Yangcheon's bodyguard for about 2 weeks. Yangcheon, reflecting on the situation, realized that Muyeon had likely been assigned as his bodyguard just before his regression. As he pondered this, a sudden loud scream startled him and the others around him. A bodyguard was advising the person he was assigned to protect not to stray too far, warning that she might be in danger if she wandered away from her guards. The person reassured her bodyguard, dismissing his concerns as excessive. She pointed out that the Unified Dragon Assembly was taking place, and given the presence of many members of the Jiyu clan, no one would dare to cause any trouble or create a disturbance. Upon hearing her voice, Yangcheon felt a sense of familiarity but couldn't quite place where he had heard it before. The bodyguard, clearly agitated, explained to the person he was protecting that his concern was precisely due to the risk of her encountering the heir of the Jiyu clan, whom they were trying to avoid. Yangcheon was taken aback by the realization that someone he didn't know was actively trying to avoid him. He considered the possibility that they might not have been referring to him specifically, given the large number of people within the Jiyu clan. The person then told her bodyguard that the likelihood of encountering the heir was very low, given the large crowd in the area, and assured him that she would not meet him anytime soon. At that moment, Yangcheon finally recalled who the voice belonged to. As she turned around and saw Yangcheon directly in front of her, she was taken aback by the unexpected encounter. Both she and Yangcheon stared at each other in surprise. At that instant, Muyeon approached and whispered to Yangcheon, noting that both the woman and her bodyguard looked as though they had seen something horrifying upon spotting him. Muyeon then asked if Yangcheon knew who they were. At that moment, Yangcheon thought to himself that there was no way he could forget the person standing before him. Her shoulder-length hair and black, beady eyes were unmistakable, and the ring she wore on one of her hands, with a symbol that became clear upon closer inspection, was familiar to him. Yangcheon, already aware of the ring's significance, recognized its importance. The person before him was Peng Aoi, a member of the Hebei Peng clan and his former fiancé. The reason for the arranged marriage with the Hebei Peng clan, one of the 4 largest clans, was straightforward. The Jiyu clan, equally prestigious, had a child of similar age to Peng Aoi, and Yangcheon was expected to become the heir if no unforeseen circumstances arose. The Peng clan likely saw the marriage as a beneficial alliance, strengthening their position by connecting with the powerful Jiyu clan. However, there was a significant issue: the trouble caused by Yangcheon. The negative rumors about him, such as abandoning his training to create more problems, did not sit well with the Peng clan. The most damaging factor, which severely strained the relationship between the Jiyu clan and the Peng clan, was the way Yangcheon spoke to his fiancé, Peng Aoi. When Peng Aoi saw Yangcheon, she asked him why he was there. Before she could finish, Yangcheon interrupted her and asked the same question in return. Peng Aoi responded that she was in Shaanxi for some business. She added that Yangcheon did not own all of Shaanxi, so she was not obligated to report her activities to him while in the region. Peng Aoi, clearly irritated, asked Yangcheon why he was speaking to her so rudely and reminded him that she was still a year older. Yangcheon, with a hint of a joke, said he had forgotten and told her to let it go and move on. He then turned his attention to Wi Seol-Ah, instructing her to return with him once she had finished buying the dumplings she wanted. As Wi Seol-Ah excitedly approached with a large amount of dumplings from the shop, Yangcheon turned back to Peng Aoi, wishing her a pleasant stay regardless of her purpose in Shaanxi. He bid her farewell and left with Wi Seol-Ah. Peng Aoi was still irritated that Yangcheon continued to treat her disrespectfully, despite being older and deserving of polite interaction. As she watched him walk away, she regretted that this situation had unfolded while she was also preoccupied with the troubles caused by her brother. Hung Aoi then glanced at Wi Seol-Ah, who was walking alongside Ji-yu Yangcheon, and wondered if Wi Seol-Ah was Ji-yu Yangcheon's servant, as she had never met her before. She speculated that with such a charming companion as Wi Seol-Ah by his side, perhaps Ji-yu Yangcheon had changed and become a better person than he used to be. Hung Aoi recalled the time she and Ji-yu Yangcheon first met and remembered how he had been incredibly rude, dismissing her as nothing more than the daughter of a concubine. Overwhelmed by anger, Hung Aoi had grabbed Ji-yu Yangcheon by his clothes and demanded that he repeat his words. Ji-yu Yangcheon, with a menacing tone, had told her that what he said was entirely true, that she was nothing more than the daughter of a concubine. At that moment, Hung Aoi delivered a powerful left hook to Ji-yu Yangcheon's face, sending him crashing to the ground. As he lay there, Hung Aoi stood over him and declared that, despite being prepared to endure an arranged marriage and overlook the terrible rumors about Ji-yu Yangcheon for the sake of the Peng clan, his actions had crossed the line. She told him that she no longer cared about the marriage and that she intended to make him pay for the disrespectful things he had said to her. At that moment, Hung Aoi thought to herself that Ji-yu Yangcheon had likely not changed since then and would still be the rude person he once was. However, as she observed him now, she noticed something different about him. He didn't seem to be the same person he used to be. Hung Aoi watched as Ji-yu Yangcheon helped Wi Seol-Ah, speaking to her gently and showing no signs of rudeness. She thought to herself that it was unlikely Ji-yu Yangcheon had truly changed, assuming that someone as unpredictable as him wouldn't have matured. Hung Aoi speculated that his seemingly improved behavior might simply be due to him being in a particularly good mood that day. As Hung Aoi was lost in thought about Ji-yu Yangcheon, a loud voice pierced through the crowd, startling everyone present. Muyan quickly asked Ji-yu Yangcheon if he was all right, to which Ji-yu Yangcheon replied that he was fine. Meanwhile, Wi Seol-Ah expressed concern over whether the dumplings Ji-yu Yangcheon was holding were still intact. A member of the team responsible for managing the entrance to the Unified Dragon Assembly was telling the loud individual that shouting would not resolve the issue. At that moment, the person yelled again, insisting that he didn't have time to argue and demanding immediate permission to enter the Unified Dragon Assembly. The loud individual was Peng Wujin, Hung Aoi's brother. Peng Wujin further asserted that he would take full responsibility if any issues arose from his entry. This declaration made the person in charge wary, as they began to suspect that Peng Wujin might be a criminal attempting to evade capture. Realizing that his words had sounded suspicious, Peng Wujin quickly told the person in charge to disregard what he had said and insisted that he be allowed to participate in the Unified Dragon Assembly immediately. Hearing this, Ji-yu Yangcheon advised Muyan to assist Peng Wujin, noting that while anyone could participate in the assembly, entry was only permitted if their identity could be verified. Despite this, the person in charge still refused to grant Peng Wujin access to the assembly. One of the bodyguards placed a hand on Peng Wujin's shoulder and advised him to stop shouting and avoid causing a scene. In response, Peng Wujin grabbed the bodyguard's hand and forcefully slammed him onto the ground. The onlookers were shocked and demanded to know what Peng Wujin was doing, stunned by his sudden aggression and the way he had thrown the bodyguard to the floor. At that moment, Peng Wujin told the person in charge that his demonstration of skill should now grant him entry to the Unified Dragon Assembly. The person in charge, however, responded firmly that Peng Wujin would not be allowed in after his violent encounter with the bodyguard. Seeing this unfold, Muyan asked Ji-yu Yangcheon if they should intervene in the situation. Ji-yu Yangcheon replied that they should leave the matter as it was and avoid getting involved, not wanting to be entangled in the trouble. He added that the situation would resolve itself in time, and there was no need for them to interfere. The person in charge shouted at Peng Wujin, explaining that he couldn't have things his way because there were established rules and regulations. Peng Wujin could not enter the Unified Dragon Assembly without proper verification of his identity. Peng Wujin insisted that his skills should be sufficient for entry, but the person in charge countered that skill alone was not enough to grant him access. At that moment, Peng Wujin, unable to contain his frustration, shouted at the person in charge, insisting that he should not disrespect the young clan head of the Peng clan. The revelation that Peng Wujin was the young clan head of the Peng clan left everyone present in shock. In the past, as snow fell outside, Hung Aoi asked her brother, Hung Woojin, what he was doing. Woojin, noticing his sister, greeted her with a good morning and explained that he was warming himself by the fire because it was very cold. He was also roasting a sweet potato. Aoi asked why he was doing this in front of her room and what he was holding in his hand along with the sweet potato. Woojin explained that since the sweet potato was taking too long to cook, he decided to use a wooden plaque, a badge he had received, to stoke the fire and make it burn more strongly. Upon hearing this, Aoi punched her older brother on the head, frustrated by his foolishness. Woojin, taken aback, asked why she had hit him, to which Aoi replied that he deserved it. She then asked Woojin if he knew what he was holding in his hand. Woojin, annoyed, answered that it was firewood. Aoi corrected him, explaining that he was actually holding a prestigious plaque from the Pung clan, given by the clan head. The plaque was a significant honor, awarded to the top graduate of the Divine Dragon Academy and the youngest successor in history, making it a very important and valuable item. Aoi then asked Woojin if he knew what he could do with the plaque. Woojin, still confident, replied that he could use it as firewood. Aoi, infuriated by her brother's ignorance, became even more annoyed and was on the verge of hitting him again due to his stupidity. As Woojin shielded himself from another possible beating, Aoi spoke to him seriously, reminding him that he needed to act more like a successor since he was destined to become the clan head one day. She added that although she could never quite understand what Woojin was thinking, she knew he possessed remarkable skills and talent, despite his youth. She expressed her confusion about why, despite his achievements and being chosen as the successor, Woojin still seemed dissatisfied. Hearing Aoi's words, Woojin smiled warmly and told her that he simply wanted to leave this place. Aoi, understanding his desire, encouraged him to do just that, suggesting he leave and return after some time. Excited, Woojin agreed and decided to leave a letter for Aoi, stating that he would be away for a while. However, Aoi's frustration grew when she saw the letter, especially since Woojin had been gone for 4 months without returning home. At that moment, one of Aoi's servants arrived with news from the beggar sect, reporting that they had last seen Woojin in Shaanxi. Aoi wondered why her brother had traveled so far away, despite his promise to return after some time. Back in the present, Woojin was shouting at the top of his lungs, demanding to be allowed to participate in the Unified Dragon Assembly. He insisted that he had already provided all necessary information about his identity and should therefore be granted entry to the assembly. The person in charge told Woojin that he was not authorized to grant him entry to the assembly. However, Woojin refused to accept this answer, insisting that he did not have time to argue and needed to attend the Unified Dragon Assembly. He asked how much more proof he would need to provide to be admitted. Woojin then declared that he would show them the Dark Knight Blade to prove his identity and secure his participation in the assembly. At that moment, Yangcheon was taken aback when Woojin mentioned the Dark Knight Blade, a technique exclusive to the direct bloodline of the Pung clan. He began to consider that Woojin might indeed be who he claimed to be. Yangcheon thought to himself that he needed to leave the area quickly, as he had no desire to become entangled in any dubious business or face any potential trouble. At that moment, Elder Lee arrived and placed a hand on Yangcheon, stopping him from leaving. Elder Lee addressed Woojin, acknowledging that since Woojin had mentioned the Dark Knight Blade, a technique known only to the direct bloodline of the Pung clan, he believed Woojin's claims were true. Elder Lee then told the person in charge that, given Woojin's evident skill, they should allow him to participate in the assembly. Hearing Elder Lee's words, Woojin bowed his head in gratitude, thanking him for permitting his participation in the Unified Dragon Assembly. He then introduced himself, saying, "I am Pung Woojin, the successor of the Pung clan. It is an honor to meet you, Elder Lee, the esteemed Grand Master of the Pure Flame Fist from the renowned Gu clan." Hearing Woojin refer to him as the Grand Master of the Pure Flame Fist, Elder Lee laughed heartily and remarked that he hadn't heard that title in a long time. He reassured Woojin not to worry, stating that he would indeed be allowed to participate in the event. Meanwhile, other servants voiced their concerns, arguing that they should not admit random individuals without proper confirmation of Woojin's claim to be the Pung clan's successor. Elder Lee addressed their concerns, assuring them that he was confident Woojin was telling the truth and that there was no need to worry about his identity. He pointed out that Woojin resembled his father closely and noted that only members of the Peng clan had the well-built physique Woojin possessed. Elder Lee further confirmed Woojin's claim by mentioning the ring he wore, which was exclusive to Peng clan members, serving as additional proof of his legitimacy as the clan's successor. Elder Lee then shifted the topic and asked Woojin why the successor of the Peng clan wanted to participate in a competition aimed at selecting new members for the GU clan's sword units. Woojin answered confidently, explaining that life in the Peng clan was not fulfilling for him, so he decided to enter the competition with the hope of joining the GU clan instead. GU Yangcheon thought Woojin was out of his mind after hearing his answer. In contrast, Elder Lee laughed heartily and asked Woojin if he had asked for permission from his family for this decision. Woojin cheerfully admitted that he knew his family would never approve, so he decided to run away from home instead. Elder Lee continued to laugh at Woojin's boldness, while Gu Yangcheon thought he might be somewhat foolish. Elder Lee then noted that Woojin appeared well-trained and inquired about his age. Woojin replied that he was 23 years old. Elder Lee was surprised that Woojin, despite his youth, appeared so capable, and he thought to himself that the Peng clan had been raising a formidable talent. However, Elder Lee turned his gaze toward Gu Yangcheon with disappointment and remarked to Woojin, indicating Gu Yangcheon, that he wished Gu Yangcheon could learn a thing or two from him. Muyan, upon hearing this, tried to console Gu Yangcheon, saying that Elder Lee was not referring to him. Meanwhile, Wi Seol-Ah asked Gu Yangcheon why Elder Lee had called him an idiot. Annoyed by their comments, Gu Yangcheon snapped at them, telling them to be quiet, as their words were causing him more distress than Elder Lee's remarks. Gu Yangcheon thought to himself that he didn't care what anyone said about him or how he was compared to Woojin. It was evident that Woojin was truly exceptional and extraordinarily strong. Gu Yangcheon recalled that, not long from now, Woojin would earn a prestigious title and be known as the Blade Emperor Peng Woojin. At that moment, while Gu Yangcheon was still reflecting on this, Peng Aoi arrived, both worried and relieved to see her older brother again. Peng Woojin, excited to reunite with his sister, was about to greet her when Peng Aoi delivered a powerful kick straight to Woojin's face. At that moment, Peng Aoi's aura radiated with intense anger as she confronted her brother. She was furious that Woojin had claimed to be the successor of the Peng clan while having run away from home without informing anyone. Instead of a proper explanation, he had merely left a note saying he would return soon. Woojin, trying to calm his sister, asked for a moment to explain his situation and hoped she would give him the chance to clarify everything. Peng Aoi, upon hearing Woojin's plea for mercy, demanded to know what he intended to say about his situation. Woojin, anxious and unable to provide a satisfactory explanation, desperately asked Aoi to spare his life. This plea only fueled Aoi's anger further. She fiercely beat her brother, determined to teach him a lesson about his actions. As she struck him, Aoi expressed her fury that Woojin had abandoned their home simply to try and join another clan's sword unit. She emphasized that it was absurd to think the clan would accept a successor from a different clan. Woojin, in the midst of his beating, begged his sister to spare him and to forgive him for his mistakes. Realizing that his sister was not going to forgive him, Woojin decided to seek help from Elder Lee. Gu Yangcheon suggested to Elder Lee that Woojin might seriously get hurt if the fight continued and urged him to intervene and stop the siblings' conflict. However, Elder Lee, observing the situation, initially dismissed Gu Yangcheon's concerns, noting that Peng clan members had resilient bodies and would survive even severe beatings. Yet, as he glanced back at Woojin, who was desperately pleading for help, Elder Lee reconsidered his stance. It became evident that Woojin might indeed suffer severe harm from his sister's relentless assault. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.